Today I'm speaking to a PhD candidate in international relations. So those of us who work in nuclear power and the nuclear industry are always well aware that nuclear, it's big stake, heavy geopolitics. It's always involved. That's actually the case for the entire energy sector. I've worked in different energy projects, and countries are always in this big, massive competition. They've got these grand strategies, all this type of things, and this International Atomic Energy Agency. So, Wandile Shezi, welcome to this channel. He's from University of Johannesburg. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what do you, when you look as an international relations expert on nuclear power, what do you see? What is your perspective on this?
So on nuclear power, and again, these are my views and not
Mm.
necessarily enforced on by anybody else. So my idea is that we need constant baseload power to support, especially emerging and high energy intensive economies. So the view is, if coal is that much dirty, what might be our next best alternatives in terms of providing constant power without any interruptions? And that's when nuclear energy came into the fold, which is literally the second largest low carbon emissions energy source. So I feel like for me, it's pretty downplayed that nuclear energy doesn't get the spotlight it deserves as being a low carbon emitter, a low carbon emission energy source in terms of providing constant electricity in emerging states, and especially when you factor in industrialization, which is going to need a constant and sustainable supply of energy. Backing that up with artificial intelligence as well, AI. We're in the age of 4IR, which needs constant energy at any given time of the day. And now with renewable energy, not that I have anything against renewable energy. Yes, it can work, but it needs to be paired up with base load for it to work efficiently. We can't hear you.
Sorry, what do you say to those then who say, look, base load and dispatchable energy, these are outdated concepts. We don't need them anymore. They make this argument. They say, nah, it's fine. You can just fine tune your demand on the grid with a smart grid.
So I say to those, it's blindsided. They're missing. They're not looking at the bigger picture, because remember, with intermittent, you need to pair it up with some sort of battery energy storage system, and there are a lot of complexities around that as well. So you need to find, how do I put this in a more I'm not sure how to put it.
I'll tell you the way I look at it as an engineer. Okay, so
Okay.
if you look at the history of the Industrial Revolution, we always went to more dense fuels. Okay, we had wood, we had coal, we had gas, and then sometimes dispatchable fuels came in. So hydrocarbons are very good for airplanes, for example. You can take it from one location to another. Nuclear might not be able to do that. But what economists used to call creating aggregate demand, so it's creating a demand for goods and services. I just see that as baseload capacity. You've got a capacity of energy that you need to smash into an industry, do it over and over and over again until you get your stuff to mass production. That's how you industrialize your society. And that is sort of why I see nuclear as such a no-brainer, because you have, I looked at Sweden the other day. They've got 2 nuclear reactors for the whole country, man. 2. That's done.
Yeah.
It's like we can add 3, 4 for South Africa. We're halfway with with decarbonization. Then everyone else can relax with the CO2, and we start focusing on our industries. That's sort of how I see it.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and I don't know. With us, if you remember well, during Jacob Zuma's tenure, he wanted to actually fast track or build 9.6 gigawatts worth of nuclear energy. By now, we could be literally close to starting up the first reactor, and then the other ones will follow suit in the coming years, and load shedding wouldn't really be a problem as it is right now.
Do you know what happened in the politics with that decision? Why didn't that RFI go out? Or?
I think it was based on the sense that not enough. What's the word? How do you put it? What's this? There were certain procedures that were not followed, basically, that led to the downfall of the 9.6 gigawatts, because that's what the renewable energy, the faith commissions, there's green energy movement, they took that whole
And
program.
the guys at UCT who told me in an email, I can show to the public, they don't believe me. I asked them, can you come to this channel to speak to nuclear? They said, no, speak to this expert, anti-nuclear guy. So the guys at UCT admitted to me they're involved with anti-nuclear people. That's corruption, and they are advising our president. Okay, they like
Yes,
probably corruption. So
they tend to do that, and they literally took the whole program based on certain procedures that were not followed. But then again, if you look at the president's, I think, view in terms of you're trying to secure energy security, the very same energy problems that we're having now, we wouldn't be worried as much, because now the best time to have built nuclear power plants rather was 10 years ago. The next best time is literally right now.
yeah, it's build it now, get it done. And the thing is, when I explain to people, yeah, people think it takes 10 to 15 years. That's nonsense. I've been working in the processes in France. It takes a long time to iron out the old errors from the system. Okay, that is what the planning, what they call requirements engineering. So you take this does that does that, you plan it, everything, you iron, you design, you redesign, you simplify. And then when you start mobilizing your supply chain, you say, okay, I'm going to build the first one. That's expensive, as expected. Second one, get a little bit better. And then third, fourth, you start knocking them down. France is now that second curve. That's where these renewable guys are panicking. They were looking at us as, no, we don't know what we're doing. We're too expensive. And I say today, if it's so expensive, why do they have to keep reminding us of that? And why are they increasingly reminding us of that? Because they know that's
Also,
coming down.
another argument that I like to bring to the fold is that what really matters when it comes to energy production is it in terms of cost, right? So this is cost to the end user. What matters is it the cost of the energy source itself, or the cost to the end user, the people that are actually procuring the energy? Because you find that with nuclear energy, especially in South Africa's case, the cost of electricity per kilowatt produced by nuclear energy continues to decrease over the years. Whereas renewable, on the other hand, they tell you to build the renewable energy plant over the years, it's gone cheaper. But what's the cost to the end user, the people who are actually buying the electricity?
But this is where the OECD came up with a very good report called The Full Cost of Electricity. Finally, somebody is saying what the engineers have been suspecting for a while. And it shows that the cheapest is coal. So South Africa should keep our coals, but we should upgrade them to a higher level coal. That's my view, okay? And then it's natural gas. We don't have that, but we can have the ships. And then integration is nuclear. And then it's renewable. So these guys have been passing the integration costs onto the customer. They want the grid to change for us. No, you're going to change for the grid, pal. We're not that stupid in South Africa. You can do that in America if you want to.
Yeah. So another thing that my one of my postgraduate lecture that I used to take a course in diplomacy, Prof. Landsberg, he used to like to say that we need to find African solutions for African problems. Because now if you're going to bring a design from elsewhere where it's not tested and you bring it to an African space, it's going to create more problems than solutions.
And I want to emphasize this point as a civil engineer. It's very important. So civil engineers, my job is to talk to a lot of people all day long, to take all that requirements into account and bring one design. So to make it simple, we design for human habitat. It's not just electricity, okay? It's a human habitat. And if you're going to move a small reactor in, say, Mpumalanga now that these renewable guys are doing, which are collapsing local communities, what is going to happen? They're going to move it a little bit to the left-hand side. Then people need to move a little bit here. Then all that requirements I took into account is at the risk of going to collapse. That is what they don't want to tell you, okay? That's why civil engineers are raising our voices. We say no ways. The best way to do for any plant that you're upgrading is take the exact same plant and just upgrade to a newer model. So the simplest one would be upgrade the coal to Heli coal. Those communities can be at calm. Their coal reserves will still be used for themselves. And then what South Africa should do is invest again in the pebble bed that's been developed in America and China, bring it back home. And we say that was the ideal solution for the next phase of upgrade in 10, 20 years from now. And by then that SMR will be ready. That means because pebble bed, you don't need water for it. It's ideal for the highland with the cooling system, everything. So it's unique for our geography. That was what they used to call the grand strategie. Okay, the grand strategy in policy to protect us by falling back on our own resources because we don't have natural gas. Renewable guys know this. You need to import natural gas sometimes to stabilize the grid. So why do we want to become geopolitically dependent on another country?
I don't know. I guess, again, I think it plays on who funds them, because most of the time they're going to be pushing their narrative, whatever it is that they want.
National Endowment for Democracy. That's who's
they're looking
funding
at the bottom line. So that's the one of the biggest problems that I have again, especially with the replacement of coal-fired power stations in your Mpumalanga, Limpopo region and replacing it with renewable energy. Let's say, for instance, how do you then replace 1,000 megawatts coal-fired power station with a 300 megawatts renewable energy program? Bearing in mind that the output factor of the renewable energy and compared to coal or nuclear is very low. So how then do you balance a growing economy with low energy outputs in the long run?
Yeah, but my biggest worry is this: when you displace, let's say you figure it out, you get the electricity right, which I can see there is some evidence that it is possible. Now those people need to go and they need to work in all those areas. Whenever populations are forced to move around like that and adapt at a very quick pace, you have population stress. You're going to kill people. That's what I want to tell them. Okay, they are not thinking of the social consequences of their solutions, and that's why we always say the best civil engineers, they create solutions for their problems. They don't create problems for their solutions. And that is what is happening here. They want the grid to adapt to us. They want this. You're creating problems. Guys, replace it with one reactor. That's it. End of discussion. But here's something I want to bring in you and your IR expert. Have you looked into the contractual agreements between the countries on buying reactors yet?
Not that much because my entire focus is based on South Africa's energy space. So I haven't looked
Okay.
at into any
So, so,
of
so what
other.
is our policy in terms of international relations? Because we're a non-aligned country usually. We don't take sides in great powers, or how does that work?
Regarding the non-alignment in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Well, I mean, not just that, in terms of our energy strategy. Like, have we thought a little bit about how applying our geopolitical position towards our energy position? Or are we not there yet?
I don't want to speak out of
Yeah,
again, I'm also subjected to being corrected, but I
yeah,
don't think so personally. Because I mean, you look at Russia, they're literally the number one nuclear vendor state. So it literally does not make sense why we're not collaborating with them in terms of building more reactors. Yes, the 9.6 gigawatt nuclear deal failed, but that model of building that the whole fleet of reactors
yeah,
was almost favorable to South Africa because the we were expected to start paying back that money once the reactor started operating and
yeah.
creating revenue. That's when we expected to start paying back. And the nice thing about that whole deal was that once one reactor starts operating, it will start funding the next reactor up until all the other reactors are built and we're able
Exactly.
to settle the loan over the next, I don't know how long, I don't know, I think it was a 20-year period, if not more.
Well, if it's
So
a 3% interest rate, it's about 18 years. But now the loans are almost negative. They're very close to zero. So it's going to pay itself off in a very short space of time. Because if you have one reactor, it adds 10% to GDP of South Africa. Just the
exactly.
increase in GDP you can use to pay off the reactor and pay the new one. So don't tell me it is expensive. It's cock. They don't know what they're talking about. Okay, we've got the money. You know, these guys don't. They just don't want to look at the facts because they're scared. Because when the facts come out, these guys start backtracking.
Yeah, so I think it's the whole narrative of securing their own bottom line. They don't want to explore other industries where they might also hit on their own bottom line. So it's safe for them to say no, don't include nuclear energy. Because for the life of me, I have not come across any nuclear advocate that does not see the good within renewable energy. And they
Yeah,
also say, like, you can build renewable energy, you can build nuclear energy power plants with alongside renewable energy because literally going to the future, that's the whole model that's going to work, especially at the demise of coal, right?
yeah.
So you need to have some sort of low carbon energy source pushing forward them while providing some sort of baseload, which is nuclear energy after hydro electricity, right? So pair that up with renewable energy, you're literally setting your country up to the next industrialization phase.
But I think this is ultimately geopolitically what's about. There's a lot of interest for it. I don't think it's just one country. The United States is definitely involved in the National Endowment for Democracy funding Earth Life Africa. The guys protesting the plan. So just remember that a little bit, guys.
And I've met a
Um,
couple of people from that organization and the other one, the SAFEI, if I'm not mistaken. Those
as an IR expert, why aren't we clamping down on these NGOs that are getting money that come from very dodgy sources? Like, what is the law in terms of this type of thing?
in terms of the law, I'm not necessarily too clued up about it. But again, it's anything about any advocacy group. As long as they have their funding, they're able to push the narrative. And right now, with propaganda all over social media, it's easy to convince and sway people to think otherwise. So I don't think government has any sort of leeway in terms of stopping that, because again, we are a developing country. We don't necessarily have the means to stop this just to promote something else. It's a melting pot, for to be honest.
Mm. Well, the way I think we should approach it is this: we should have again a grand strategy for South Africa. We should think very clearly. So, say, I like the history of France. General de Gaulle knew what he was doing. So, I'll give you an
Mm.
example. Emmanuel Macron, he was elected saying, "I'm in favor of Margaret Thatcher, and I want to be against nuclear power." A Frenchman saying that's like the biggest insult to their countrymen ever. Why? Because he's a Davos guy. He's trained in the foreign countries. His brain is brainwashed by whatever, and he's the first French leader to speak English, which is another insult. You don't do that in front of the cameras. So what happened? The French fell back on their grand strategy. General de Gaulle placed his national assets in strategic locations to solve historical conflicts. Why? Because he knew that the French Revolution started when ordinary countrymen spoke to each other, okay, in the countryside. And that is where he put his reactors. So what happened? The French Union started mobilizing in a thing called La Voix du Nucléaire. That is the guys who also had the Gilets jaunes when Macron passed that stupid tax. They said, no, we're not taking it. Those were working class Frenchmen in the countryside. And now what's happening? The French deep state started mobilizing them to the point now where, get this, Macron was favor of Margaret Thatcher. Remember that? They are renationalizing EDF, and they're going to mobilize the capacity of the state to build their reactors very quickly and get it done. End of discussion. The French have looked through these guys very carefully, and then they know America's in a trouble position. So why are the Americans so against nuclear power? Well, they haven't treated their waste yet. America needs 3 depositories before it can think of start building a new project. Otherwise, those projects are tied down in legislation for years. So what happens? The Americans has to find the location, but the Americans, no state wants it. Okay, and it seems the oil lobby in America has been funding activists against nuclear depository. So that's also where the geopolitics gets into. So what's going to happen? Eventually, the Americans have declared an emergency and quickly build those depositories to move their waste away. Not that waste is dangerous, really. It's that people perceive it as dangerous. That's an important thing. So you have to do that before you can build. So the Americans then also forgot to take care of their technical expertise. Many American engineers worked with me in France, right? So now they have to reschool themselves with a very expensive lesson. My estimate is $200 billion. It's 2 years of the war in Ukraine before the US can react. So the US don't want to open that can of worms because, and the other reason for this is this: if America starts moving to a depository, people are going to say, do you have bombs in there? And then they say, no, we don't. It's like, prove it to us. And what does that mean? The United States has to become compliant with international law for the first time ever. That is a big,
Which is something you're not going to see anytime soon.
no, but this is why they're so against it. What happens if America has to become compliant with international law in nuclear waste? Okay. Questions have to be asked about the supply chains to Israel because America gave Israel 17 nuclear weapons. Israel's never signed a non-proliferation treaty. They never signed
Allegedly.
it. Okay, allegedly. No, there's good evidence for that. You can look at Garth Smith from the Libertarian Institute, did a lot of research on that. Benjamin Netanyahu is involved with the nuclear mafia. That's another question that needs to be asked. What is happening over there? That's why he's trying to face prison sentences. And just by the way, it was the apartheid regime that did it. It was Shimon Peres and P.W. Botha met at one stage. There's good enough circumstantial evidence to link that question open. So why are the Americans against nuclear weapons or nuclear power? Because they don't want to ask the tough questions about international law. That's what it comes down to. That's what my theory is. And, if America is found to trade or give debt to a country that violates the non-proliferation treaty, existing American law comes into question, which means all debt to Israel is suspended. And that means the Palestinian question has to be settled before they can get more money. So these are the bigger questions of nuclear that is not being asked at the moment. And this is like another well thing. Person who sort of told me this, Noam Chomsky, of all people. Geopolitics is interesting in energy. There's always a reason for something, but it's not that nuclear is expensive.
Yeah, and that's the most common misconception when everybody thinks about nuclear energy. They think, oh, it's too expensive. But once you build or introduce a financing model, that whole narrative changes. Now, nuclear energy is actually something that can be built, especially with SMRs. Apparently, I'm hearing that SMRs may be cheaper than your traditional nuclear energy plants. So
That might be true. The first question, sorry, the first cost I got was it's about the same per kilowatt for the initial build. Second, third might be getting down. So it remains to be seen, but it's definitely going to come down.
yeah. So on that as well, I read somewhere that so the just South Africa's Just Energy Transition Plan, right? The JIP plan. It's scared the financing around it is around 690 million, I think,
Yeah,
somewhere around there. And then the Jacob Zuma's 9.6 gigawatt plan was estimated at around 1 trillion. And you look at the difference from 1 trillion and the 690 billion, it's not that much, to be
yeah.
honest, to secure 9.6 gigawatts worth of energy, which would mean that we would not have anything called load shedding right now. Well, in the next future, in
Okay.
the next
Well,
20, but
that,
yeah.
that that's an important point to highlight. So we would have been out of load shedding had it not been for those activists, environmental activists. I want every South African to internalize that message that these activists have been responsible for the hell that South Africa has been going through since Jacob Zuma's time, basically. And Earthlife Africa needs to know this. Those guys who are they, and those guys at Cape Town involved the anti-nuclear lobby. We're holding you accountable for that as well. Watch it.
Which is arguably true because I mean you are replacing base load with a weather-based energy source, whereby if there's not enough sun during that day, that means so much electricity has been generated, and especially if there's no wind, that means you can't generate maximum output of that wind farm or that wind or solar energy farm. So it creates a whole base load issue,
Mm.
basically supplying that enough energy to make sure that the economy runs freely without any interruptions, which because I mean we all know that access to energy leads to well, there's a positive correlation with access to energy and a positive economic growth. And then I think there were stats, I'm not sure on the numbers, but then they've actually calculated that amount of load I think at stage 6, we lose billions of rand. The economy loses billions of rand, which is not good, especially for a developing country. I mean, look at South Africa's
Mm.
unemployment rate. It is the highest I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't see that coming down. Yes, there is government initiatives to decrease that. But if you have a prevailing energy problem, that issue would not be solved. It is just we have.
Yeah.
So first things first, we need to sort out our energy source.
No, I totally agree that we need, but you see, this is now a debate where I think a few whites need to start listening, especially the Afrikaners, because they panic over this question. My belief, we need to nationalize ESCOM. Okay, I'm standing with Malema on that. I'm saying that proudly. Why? France's utility is nationalized. Most of the EU's utility is national. Don't be scared of a national utility. The problem has never been ESCOM. Never. Okay. The problem is NERSA. Okay, NERSA sets a tariff that forces Eskom to compete at a cost that is below their recoverable costs. So they forced on to compete on rates that will destroy the utility. Eskom should set its own rate like it was during the apartheid years. Okay, why? That's how all European countries do it. If it can set its own rates, it can recover the cost. Of course, the state will still give it debt extensions, and we save the utility from collapsing. ESCOM must be saved. I make a point here very clearly because there's a lot of people saying that ESCOM must be deregulated. You don't have a clue what you're talking about. If you think, if you want to see what happened to Russia in the 1990s, that's a deregulated utility. Okay, it collapsed the Russian economies and it set life expectancy back by 30 years, and women were forced into prostitution. So don't tell me that's a good idea. I think ESCOM must be saved. ESCOM must be nationalized. And the next step, again, I agree with Malema. People don't. I think I'm not serious. We need to nationalize our railway infrastructure to further our industrialization of the country. We need a mixed economic model. This idea that the free market's going to solve it's never going to happen. You need a mixed model. Okay, European social democracies work this way. They're healthy countries. Nothing wrong with Scandinavia. That's how South Korea developed. That's how China's developing at the moment. China's a bit more autocratic, but that's the model South Africa must follow. We are not the British Empire. Okay, we're not going to run on free markets. It doesn't work, and the reason is the free market Chicago School of Economics has totally been destroyed now by an economist who I believe who history will rank as the greatest economist of the century is Sir Tony Wrigley, who created the low entropy theory of wealth. Energy in a low controllable form is what generates wealth. That is what Keynesian economists historically used to call aggregate demand, right? You take a lot of energy, you put it in the industry, you create a new industry, and then you go and you go. That was the apartheid model. So what I'm saying to a lot of whites listening is just take what the Afrikaners had under apartheid, and we take that exact same model, but we do it for all South Africans now. And that's how we reindustrialize the country. And if that means that I'm a nationalist or a communist, fine, you can make me one, but that means my parents and grandparents were communists as well. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And another problem that we do have in this country is grid availability. So I've been hearing a lot of chats that we don't have enough grid availability in terms of bringing online your renewable energy programs. So there's this thing that transmission lines as well. So we've had up until I think we're heading towards bid window 8 right now in terms of renewable energy and their risk mitigation. But then the biggest hurdle is projects may be accepted, but the regions where they're accepted as there's no grid to support it or no transition line to get electricity there. So those are also issues that government needs to address when they are considering building more new renewable energy. Whereas if you consider nuclear energy on the other side, once a coal-fired power station is closed down, you just build on top of that because there's an existing grid and transmission line.
Exactly, and that's the important point that people miss. Grid integration costs. I
Yeah.
mean, from what I've heard, those solar panels in the Karoo are still standing. They haven't built the lines yet.
I
And
wouldn't
they're
be
getting
surprised.
paid. They're getting paid for the thing producing flipping electricity in the middle of the desert. What does that have to do with wealth? Because wealth, and this is again Tony Wrigley. People need to read the Energy and the English Industrial Revolution and the Path to Sustained Growth. Two excellent books that dispels Milton Friedman's crap from the Chicago School. Okay,
Yeah.
what is wealth? It's low entropy. Human beings like forcing stuff in a very slow state. That's what wealth.
Mm,
That's what wealth. So why is
mm,
infrastructure important? All infrastructure collapses over its wealth lifetime. So if our bridges aren't maintained in a low entropy state, they collapse, we could destroy the wealth. So wealth is just goods and service, it's industry. That's what it's been. It's always been that. This idea that the market's going to do that, it doesn't exist anymore. And I think people need to
predicting
walk away from that.
you can never really predict the markets. You can have an idea of what it might be like, but to be accurately correct that at this time it'll be this, it does not necessarily mean that.
Yeah, that's right. Um, so on international relations again. So as I understand it, if we buy a plant for this is sorry, it's not a point I want to point out on international relations. Have you read John Mearsheimer's book Why Do Leaders Lie? Have you heard of?
I think I've heard of the title before, but I don't think I've read it.
Okay, so he's looked at different deals and stuff between
Yeah.
leaders. Do leaders lie to their own people? What type of patterns and dictums I can establish in international law? That's international relations, like dictums between countries. And he came to the conclusion that when states and states deal with each other, there's hardly ever a lie. Okay, it's because the stakes are too high, the risks is too high. So why do these guys oppose nuclear power? Because the vendor financing system means China loans the money from its
Mm,
national bank, which is ultimately its pension money. Okay, South Africa contributes a part of our pension money or national. Well, you fund it, government money is pension money. Okay, we build a reactor, but that project manager has to go explain to Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin why the pension money goes missing. Okay, so don't you think there will be good diligence in there? They don't like nuclear power because there's no money to steal. There's no middleman in Sandton that can negotiate
mm,
because the
and it's
International
just
Atomic Energy Agency enforces compliance. There's the issue here. And that is why these guys are so scared. They thought we won't figure it out. South Africans have got experts in criminology. As why we're the first country to fully get rid of our nuclear weapons, and I think
Yep.
we helped wrote some of those laws. We studied
Yeah.
criminal. Mandela was a criminal lawyer. Never forget that. He knew how to deal with humans.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, within the nuclear, because it's a highly regulated industry, so every cent needs to be accounted for, and the minute it goes missing, you easily pick up, no man, we use this amount of money, and then all of a sudden so much is gone, or it's unaccounted for, frivolous spending, or and you have to account. So it could be maybe that's why coal in this country is getting away with it, because now people are able to supply coal. No, was apparently I heard this in terms of when they weight the coal trucks. So instead of there being actual coal, they replace some of the coal with rocks, so that the measure actually still is in par with when it left the whatever coal mine that they put in the coal, and when it arrives to the final destination, it must still read the same number that it left with. But then during that process of from coal being loaded into the truck and them actually arriving to the destination, they replace it and put stones.
So the way I would solve that is, so I've got a mentor who's very good in contract law. Constructions, civil engineers have been studying this now for years because projects have gone bad and good, and then they looked at which ones worked, which one didn't. To solve that problem is, you see, that contractor probably does not pay a risk for that thing going wrong. Okay, so what we do nowadays in construction is we let both parties get the financing. Okay, and if both parties carry the risk, well, there
Yeah,
will be compliance
because
because
no one wants
your bank
to.
is going to ask for compliance, you see. And that is how we should solve our corruption in South Africa. Make sure both sides pay a very heavy price, okay? And then you will find more honesty in our system. We need to set up our laws to force honesty, because criminality, in my view, is a systemic issue. It's the laws forces a criminal, and that is how you're going to eliminate fraud in society. So going
Yeah.
forward, I think if we industrialize on a proper plan, not this stupid stuff that Ramaphosa is proposing now, we can follow that model, and then we'll have more honest engineers and people managing the system.
Yeah, and you find that it might not be the engineers that the problem is, it's just people who are looking for shortcuts to enrich themselves. Basically, your rational choice theory, whereby they seek to look after their own pockets before actually doing the entire job per
Yeah,
se.
but you see, if you make it expensive for him to fail,
Yeah,
the cheap
the
guys will jump ship, you see, and then the good guys
the
come
risk
in.
is limited. Yeah, it is limited because I mean, at the end of the day, you wouldn't want anything to go wrong because the burden of you having to cover those costs is just too much.
And that's also why I believe private investors will never really be able to fund infrastructure, because you see they use what they call a Sharps ratio, and that
Mm,
basically means high risk, high return, low risk, low return type of thing, and that's their first calculation usually. And then quickly they figure out, but nuclear power only pays me back money after 25 years, and
not necessarily a good ROI
and if I
business.
fund it myself and there's no private bank, I mean, it's the biggest risk of failures in the beginning, and then all that, and they say I can't build it my own. It's like, yes, infrastructure is always the responsibility of the state because it's long term.
Mm,
If a private investor thinks he's selling infrastructure, he's a rent seeker. He's not a private
yeah.
investor. And that is where I think we need to really ask questions. How do we fund our infrastructure? I think we need to go back to utilities that, they pay back the costs just to recover the cost for infrastructure. That's how they expand the industrialized society. We have a proper industrialization plan.
Mm.
The free market is not going to bring infrastructure for that exact reason.
Yeah, so that might not work in SA right now. I think I'd have to agree with you with that.
Yeah. What else? You're doing a PhD. What is that on the topic specifically?
So my topic is on the politics. Well, I'm investigating the politics of renewable energy and nuclear energy in basically in South Africa. So basically, I'm investigating the politics around nuclear energy and renewable energy in South Africa, because there's that whole contention of the government pushing renewable energy, because I don't see there's any coal plants that's envisioned to be built in the near future. Even with nuclear energy, there's provision being made for the 2,500 megawatt plants to be built in the next coming years, because it's still under the is it integrated resource plan, the IRP 20. Well, it's being updated right now, so we'll see what the final. I think they're about to take out the documents for comments to the public for comments, and then on the final document, we'll see how if they still maintain this 2,500 commencement of a nuclear build.
Okay.
So essentially, that's the my thesis. So I'm centering it around nuclear energy and renewable energy,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's a piggyback of my master's thesis, whereby I was investigating the role of nuclear energy in promoting regional economic development within the SADC region.
Okay, and it's a SADC region. Okay, I mean, that's Southern Africa, as I understand it, more or
Mm.
less.
Southern
Okay.
African Developmental Region.
Yeah, and for that, do you consider SMRs, or do you have a particular technology, or how do you sort of approach that problem?
In my current paper.
Yeah, or in your just your general opinion. I mean,
Okay, so I'm an advocate for nuclear energy, right? So, of course, we understand that as technology progresses, it becomes more efficient, more affordable as time goes by. Obviously, you can't rely on the older models, especially when you consider the past nuclear accidents whereby it was based on older models. So, obviously, you need to update, make sure that you fine tune the process, and make sure it's much more sustainable and efficient. So this is where SMRs come in, which is a much smaller, meaning and actually more, and some are gas cooled, so you can locate them in more regionally rather than having to locate the power reactors on the coast for the
mhm.
water to cool the reactor core and all of that.
So you
So
so you're looking at that any type of like the pebble bed traditionally was proposed for the inland, because of that problem.
yes, that's true.
So a
So
question I have on there: how does helium, because pebble bed cools with helium,
yeah.
how does the helium supply chain work? What is the risk of that? Like, has that been worked out yet by anyone? I mean, it's just sort of like something that popped in my head the other day.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm too clued up about that. I'd have to say I'm not too sure. I am not at
Mm.
all.
Okay,
So the
because I
supply
mean,
chain, right?
well, I think South Africa should take the pebble bed and see what's happened with it, and then work out those issues. For as I said,
Now,
my personal view is replace the coal with just old coal with newer coal. We can wait. We're
mm,
1% of the world's emissions. Sorry, they can wait for us.
I
And
think the problem replacing our current power stations with new coal, I think it's the way our coal power plants are built. They are built to take in the lower grade coal. So the minute that you try and
mm,
introduce a higher grade coal, you need to change the whole design of the coal power station. This is what I heard. So I'm not sure in practicality.
but there's history there because my grandfather actually worked on that process.
Yeah,
We're taking the old the bad quality coal, if you call it. It's not bad
yeah,
quality. It's just coal
low
with
grade. What I call it low grade coal. Yeah,
yeah, it's fewer carbon grade. Why? Because we produce fly ash. Okay, and if
yeah.
you have carbon in cement, it absorbs too much water, and then your water cement ratio mixes up, and then your strength goes down. But if you've got good fly ash with your coal, that means your cement becomes net zero. So all these net zero cements around the world, that's from South Africa's coal stations. Just by the way, if the guys they don't want to, they don't want to talk about that one. But yeah, so that is a solution. So you're saying that the Heli coal stations are not adapted for low quality coal, basically, and that will have to
Not to
change.
my knowledge, because what I heard is you need to literally replace the entire. I don't know. Is it the furnace whereby you do the burning of the coal to produce steam and then produce
Mm.
electricity? But again, I'm subjected to being corrected.
Okay, because I know the theory is in under ideal solutions, obviously. Um,
Hmm,
Existing coal power stations have got so if you burn 300 megawatt, you only get 100 out. It's one third power you get out. You lose two thirds. And I think the Heli one is you at 50 something, so you lose a lot less. And even so, theoretically, if we upgrade all of them and we get assuming the good quality coal and all the other issues solved,
hmm.
you basically increase power on the grid just by upgrading because efficiency goes up, right?
Essentially. So I don't know what's wrong with ESCOM, whether or not, because my understanding is if you are in civil engineering, you need to take into consideration maintenance plan of plant react or of coal plants. So what happened or what went wrong in terms of the maintenance plan of most of our coal plants, whereby we literally have the highest one of the well, it's very high, our maintenance plan basically of coal plants that are not contributing anything to the to the grid basically. I think the last I checked it was sitting at 18,000 megawatts of unplanned, and then the planned was around 4,000 megawatts. So you see our immediate problem is to ensure that the coal plants that are not contributing anything should be contributing something to the grid. I think that's the first plan or first
Hmm.
something to begin to solve our energy problem before trying to build new plants.
Well, I know Rob Jeffrey. He did his PhD now at the University of Johannesburg, and he's 80 something. He did a PhD thesis just on this, where he showed that South Africa needs to, I think, one or two coal stations that he did bring online, and then load shedding is pretty much gone. I suppose there
Yeah,
will still be some ups and downs. So it's not the load shedding issue. I think from what I talk from investors and people in the industry and then things, they say that it's 2 to 3 years and really been ironed out. But as I understand it, Eskom's current boss is actually doing a bloody good job now. Thanks that the Reiter has gone, he's back to Germany. It's a big surprise, Germany again.
and
Um,
funny enough, I actually have a note somewhere around here that ever since Derrida left the plant, the energy availability factor of some of the plants went up to most places to 70%. So you begin to ask yourself what was going on. Yeah, so they less than a
did you
month.
see that story that Jogpo came out with on the Reiter? So I don't know if you remember this, but he was poisoned by the coffee. Well, nobody
Oh,
interviewed the
yeah,
poisoner and the coffee lake. It's a complete made up story. And it turns out
that's
Jogpo exposed this, and he showed quite well what happened. Apartheid era, old infiltrators, security agents faked the bloody
yeah.
story. So I'm making the argument the writer was infiltration. Sorry, guys. He might be Afrikaner, but he's a Duits, He needs to leave the country, you
It's
know?
arguable because I don't know how he also got the job, because his former job, I think he was working at Nampak. He also ran the place to the ground. So I'm like, how do you then base
Yeah,
of hiring somebody where his previous track record is not so good, and you put him in a utility plant that needs somebody that knows their business?
yeah, and
Somebody
how I was we were asking. So I'm friends with people that were in competition for him, like very good qualified engineers that were selected 2 and 3rd ranks. I can't give the names out, okay? And I talked to them, and they said, well, they wish him luck, but they were like, I don't know if he's, the argument of Parliament said he knew how to work with unions. Well, it turns out he didn't, because what they didn't turn around. I work with unions in France. Okay, we work with unions around the world. Unions are the same people, whether they're black or white, doesn't matter. They're working
Mm,
people with their hands. Okay, so the way I speak to the French unions is the same way I speak to you guys at home. It's not
yeah,
different. So I could
yeah.
not understand what this whole thing was about, and a lot of investors were saying, but yes, we don't know if this oak is going to get guts what it takes. It seems he couldn't. It seems he was yelling at staff and he was managing the place to the ground. So sorry, he's gone. And it seems now a guy that works from the floor upwards with respect for the people, he's treating them better, and consequently the lights is on
And
again.
true,
What a
and you
surprise!
can see this in the plants in the availability factor, because for the first time, one of the plants reached 70%. Well, six of the power plants actually, yeah, so six of the coal-fired plants began performing at 70% energy availability factor, literally just a month after the rate left.
Mm.
So
So
I
Gwede
don't know.
Montassi was right. He was betraying South Africa, because if he managed that way,
And he was very much pushing the whole renewable energy program.
in a
So I
very
think,
superficial way. That was what worried me. Like he was always in front of the cameras, but I invited him here, never responds. But he's in all the other podcasts. Those podcast guys who've got they've got a logo and a slogan and a sponsor at the back, and all those
yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Those were the guys who he was on with, but not the ordinary people. And that's always a good sign when if you can't come here and tell me what the hell is going on. This guy is dodgy. This is
Yeah.
propaganda. This is ads.
And I wouldn't be too surprised whereby in those podcasts that you mentioned that they send the questions that they're gonna ask him, and he has a picking of the questions that you can and cannot ask him during that podcast.
Really?
But then
You you
if
think
it's
it's so
out,
scripted, controlled information? It's
I think so. It could go as far as that. Like you can ask me this, but you can't ask me this because the minute you go off scripts, that means you're asking. That's when you're asking the real questions. That's
well,
when they.
I know he was interviewed by the Free Market Foundation, and I know that you guy interviewed David Ansel, and I messaged him. I said, "Dude, just ask him about nuclear power," and he actually did. And the writer's like, "No, it's too expensive. It's too expensive." And I sent the guy the stuff after. I'm like, "It's not too expensive. I'm the civil engineer," and this is what I don't get about South African media. I'm sorry. I built nuclear power station. I'm a civil nuclear engineer. That's my title, civil nuclear engineer. Okay, my job is to design these things. It's to build them. It's to
Yeah,
tell you how much it costs. When investors ask me, I give them a price. I tell them how quick you get your money back. I give them the tariffs. I give you everything. I've got the
yeah.
information. Dave Nichols, the chairperson of South African Nuclear Corporation, he gave me all the information when I just asked him, how much does it cost for South Africa? Here's the stuff. Here's that. I'm like, why can't the media say it? He's like, because there's no money to steal, guys. That's why. There's no money to steal. Just very simple. Okay. So why can't we have nuclear power? Because those crooks in Sandton, okay, those guys that are coming to strip mine our strategic national assets, they
Mm.
don't want us to know that they're not in on the deal. Okay, that's it. And that's the message I think people need to get out here. This is just fraud. This is just corruption, stopping us from developing as a society to solve these problems we've got.
Yeah, so that's the biggest problem that we have right now in this country is people always want to eat. They must, if something needs to be go ahead, like what am I getting in terms of this? Like I scratch your back, how you gonna scratch mine type of thing. And it shouldn't, especially for a developing country, because in essence, democracy, right? It's government of the people, by the people, for the people. But now and then when you get people in government where are now you start seeing they living this lavish lifestyle, they're living beyond what a servant is supposed to live. That's when questions should start being raised, asked, like, how is this possible? Whereby we put you in power to solve our issues, but then you are benefiting from the back of our struggles. Make
Mm.
it make sense.
And this is the big issue we have is that we have foreign funders. It's basically follow the money. A lot of this stuff, it's not complicated, and they're not following the people. And now this is what I've said to the
Again,
crown prince. Yeah.
you can try for the money, but then you find people, they have people in high places, and then all of a sudden they freeze your
Mm.
bank statements or bank accounts or access to those records, basically. And now that whole process goes to a standstill because now you are unable to follow the money.
Yeah. So here's what I suggest to all South Africans listening here is start speaking to each other, start mobilizing. Okay. If you want answers or questions to nuclear power, you can ask me. You can ask him in international relations. Ask everyone. Okay. If we don't know the answer, we refer to each other because we need a shared intelligence about this thing. We turn the narrative around, and the politicians come to us. We're not going to go to them. Okay. I'm waiting for Gwedi Mantashe to come here because at least he understands a little bit of this. Okay. The other guys in the country, they don't. Ramaphosa will never speak to me. I've had investors listening to this, and then they say, "But we'll pay you this to help us here." I'm like, come here. You guys are going to listen to
And,
us.
and
You know,
just to note, right, before you go any further, I remember when Ramaphosa came into his tenure, right? I think one of his first few speeches, he told the country that the country does not have enough money for nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is not in his plans. But a few months or 1 year down the line, he changed his mind or he changed his narrative on some. Yes, we are looking to nuclear energy only at the scale and pace that is affordable by the country.
and that is right now. That's the answer, right? So he's not being honest yet. You see, this is the thing that the French learned with Macron. Macron was, as I say, came with ideology foreign to the history of France and the traditions of France. Okay, the French started mobilizing, and now Macron is marching along them, and he has to say, "I love nuclear." And now the French have said, "We're going to build 6 reactors. We're going to use the pension fund money, which Macron said he wants to privatize. Don't privatize the Frenchman's pension." All these questions are now coming in, and basically the French are going to build 6 new reactors, and when they're done, they're going to build it in the rest of the world. South Africa needs 4. Here's my advice. It's what I believe. If I would advise Minister Mantashe right now, I would say, send that RFI out. You've got public support. Screw the
It's
other
been out,
guys. Okay,
been
you've
out.
got public support. It's a long time. The other thing I would say is I spoke to those boys in Dubai. Okay, These are South Africans who went to build the nuclear power station in Dubai, South Korean type. The first one should be South Korean. You tell those guys right now, come back. When I spoke to it, I said, can you just do a quick statistic? How many of you guys will come back? He said, listen, 80% of us will be there tomorrow if there's a job for me. And I'll help build up the country. So don't believe those of us who left the country don't love the country and don't want to come back and build it. That's another BS story. We'd go back if there's an opportunity for our skills to do so. Okay. And, we can help build back the country with the skills we learned in the rest of the world. I mean, it's now, 10, 20 years, a lot of people have left. A lot of people say, you know what, my kids, I want to raise them in South Africa. So let's rather do that. And I'm prepared to come back if the job is there. Okay. And that's why I'm creating employment for myself. That's my interest here. And sorry?
I think that's a sentiment a lot of people that share that have left the country because of opportunities that are better somewhere else, whereby the country, their own home country, are not necessarily producing those countries. Because I think I remember, if it was it not last year or the year before, the Coburg, I think it was a station manager, was one of the high people in Coburg. They literally live, I think it was late last year, somewhere around there. I forget his name. He left the country to to greener pastures overseas. And you'd ask yourself, why would you leave in the middle of a refurbishment program? Please make it make sense. Is it something politically is wrong? Because the minute politics enters,
I would say I don't know what the nuclear industry is, because I didn't work in the nuclear industry in South Africa. I came to France to study directly, and I worked in cement in South Africa, actually, for Lafarge. And then I came to France, and I worked here on just massive projects, and I would love to teach the country what I learned. I just went for opportunity. I had a scholarship to study in France, and I just think anyone's an idiot if you don't take it. So if you have an opportunity to leave South Africa, do so. But when you now have started settling and you're thinking of family and stuff, okay, my wife's from Iran, but we can go back and we can live there and I'll build up the country. But there is a bit of another taboo which I think we just need to break, which is there's a black-white taboo and a BE taboo and things like that. And my view has just been that I have no issue for entry-level jobs to be affirmative action or social class based or stuff. But when it comes to skilled expertise, I think everyone appreciates it doesn't matter which color, you need a guy that knows how to do his job. So that is something that the politicians are always using against people, that I think needs to break away. And we say, no, look, we're all part of the same country. We've got a complicated history. We can all use our skills to rebuild the country, and we find those compromises, because otherwise they're just going to keep on with this. I think we've seen through the abuse of these narratives, and I think now it's for us to write the story. They're not going to tell us what to do.
Yeah, this is pretty much true. I have to agree with you. Like, it's crazy what's going on in this country, and I wish politics didn't have so much leeway in terms of, especially the most important parts of the country, the things that takes the country forward, especially like in your energy industry. Like, if politics is not in there, it's very hard for your civil engineers, the people in the ground floor, the people that actually know the work, to do their work properly without following certain bureaucratic basically without following any bureaucracy, basically, because that's at best hinders our progress and ensuring that we get energy security, or we secure energy security.
Yeah, and interesting stuff. And it's like, I think a lot of these regulations and stuff, I mean, I'm not against some of it, but I think a lot of it is just, people who make rules about stuff they don't know. I think this is one thing I appreciate about the French, okay? There's no professional engineer in France. None. You don't have a qualification like that. So South Africa, you have PRING, like chartered accountant. In France, they say if you've studied at the university, you should have the knowledge. That's it. Okay, so you're not a snob. You don't have to qualify in a system and things. If you've studied and you can do a job, you're an engineer, you move up the system. And because of that, they trust the engineers to make better judgments. So there's no real there is health and safety, and there are protocols, but they don't micromanage it. They say, if you're an engineer, you have the judgment to say what is safe and what is unsafe. It's your responsibility, right? And if we start having that approach with our workers and our people, and we say, look, I trust you. You're a skilled tradesman. If you don't know something, come ask me. I'll try and find the right answer for you. Then it can, things will be a lot better. So trust people to make their own decisions and to judge risks for themselves, because they're not stupid, And that is sort of, I think, part of what needs to change.
I hear you loud and clear, and we've got a long way to go. But as I said, for now, I'm just a researcher, and I'm just following my passion and my
Mm.
interest. And of
Okay.
course, it's the people that ultimately promotes the policies and implement the policies that should start or begin to take into cognizance what your engineers are saying and telling government on what they need to do in terms of running a successful energy plants.
Mm. But do you think like the crisis with Eskom has finally woken up, that some engineers are starting to speak out and some people like, is it? I mean, because crisis forces good ideas sometimes. Do you think that is coming?
Yeah, so there's this saying that I like to say: there's opportunity in every crisis. So again, um, I've noted a lot of engineers coming to the fore, especially on Twitter. There's this one guy that I follow. During his tenure at Eskom, there was no load shedding for a straight 2 years. So he's very vocal on Twitter. He portrays his views. He does also say that he'll never go back to Eskom because of how they vilified him and how they still vilify him right now. But he's there. He gives those slight remarks, slight what's the word, on how Eskom could and can improve if only they considered 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So he's very vocal on Twitter. He's very
And
very
is he like
eloquent.
is spiteful at it for Eskom, or what is the story like? I mean, did they fire him?
You know how politics are. If you're not performing or you're not towing the party line, they
Mm.
make you exit and put in somebody that they might be more receptive to whatever it is that they're proposing or they want, or whatever mandate that they want to push. So I don't know the
Mm.
intricacies of what really happened from him leaving. Because if it were up to me, I think with the crisis we have, him and that other guy must go back and try and at least
So
solve.
there's
There's
one
something
guy
that they
listening here.
come
He
again.
says there's one listener here. He's saying the mistake people keep making is expecting solutions from those who are the problem. I like that. The same way of thinking that got us here never get us out. That's very interesting, insightful, I guess.
Yeah. So again, you need to put people who have a proven track record. So this guy has a proven track record of running Eskom successfully, but now he's being vilified, especially during Derator's tenure. They were saying the problems that Derator was facing were long started during this guy's um, tenure as a Eskom lead, basically. So there's a lot of blame shifting and not necessarily a lot of people acknowledging where they went wrong and how they could fix the problem going forward.
Hmm.
So it really is an issue with Eskom, and I hope it does come to the fore. Because one of the problems that I have, yes, Eskom has a monopoly in terms of energy generation, and then if you find that if they now start opening up to other independent power producers, that means now a lot of people are going to be buying electricity from Eskom, right? And then that means their bottom line is affected. And when their
Well,
bottom line,
the IPPs, in my view, must be absorbed by Eskom into a fully nationalized utility in South
they
Africa.
don't want it for some reason. For some reason, they're
Because
not
they're
making.
making money out of it. They're making money. They're stealing money out of it. There's no money to steal in a fully nationalized utility because EDF uses taxpayers' money again. And
So
you're going to be arrested if you steal money for that. There's criminal law coming into play. They're trying to strip mine national assets. They're trying to privatize infrastructure, privatize something that should never have been privatized in the first place. That is how it works. It's all
and
this
I'm
is.
not
It's stealing money.
and I've noticed with South Africa's privatization of certain enterprises, while the minute it becomes private, it just goes down. It
Yeah.
literally there
No.
isn't I haven't seen any good
No, look,
come out of
strategic national assets cannot be privatized, and national monopolies cannot be privatized. Okay, they
yeah.
must be ran as good old utilities. So, and if you
They
look at the
literally
reason why they're failing, it's not because they government. That's what every person is spinning. No, it's because they're forced to compete at a tariff that the government decides, not they decide. Let the directors decide the tariff, and that's how it was managed again under apartheid. That's what the whites had. Apartheid had nationalization. I hope people understand this, because they don't, they don't know the history and how these things work. They've been so brainwashed out of it. Nonsense. Certain
Yeah.
things need to be nationalized. It's just the way it is.
For it to work efficiently. But then again, so if you say that Eskom, well, they rely on NERSA to for the tariff hikes, won't you think that if Eskom was to set their own tariffs, it will be higher to the end user?
No, I mean, it depends how you structure that tariff, right? So if
Yeah.
you get those guys in Sandton to start coughing up a little bit of money, that's maybe a good idea,
Okay.
and then you say to them, you give them conditions. Say, look, we're going to give you date extensions. You come up with a plan. Your accountants tell us a plan as government. We're going to let go of NERSA, but we're not going to let you recover the cost immediately. We're going to still give you date extensions for some years as you systemically bring your costs under control. And we understand you're in a difficult position. Okay, so we will help you to a point where you come up with a plan to reach that 0.0. That's it. Help them through legislation. Don't legislate them out of existence, because that's the intention. Because I believe the real intention is a guy like Patrice Motsepe is seeing gold in his eyes with Eskom. Okay, all these type of guys, they're trying to steal the thing. That's all that this privatizations are. They're stealing something that is not theirs. Okay, and we need to kick out against it. The French had the same thing. They had politicians with the wise idea: let's privatize EDF. They sold some shares. Some foreign investors came, and EDF's mission changed from serving the French people to being a private-driven company. The French deep state reacted. They're like, okay, we see what's happening. We see what's happening. You guys are studying at the wrong universities. You've got crap in your heads. Wait a minute. Because remember, the French deep state studied the École Polytechnique. That is the military school. They're military engineers. That is what the French CIA does. Okay. And they were like, okay, let's just wait a bit. Let's see how it plays out. Let's wait for what happened historically in 1973, which was an oil shock. Oil shock came. Share price of EDF crashed. French government bought it back, and they said, now we're fully nationalized. All the investors were bought out for nothing. They lost all their money. And the French said, now we're showing you what you're going to do. So that's how we need to act with these guys. Buy them out during a crisis, and then just recapitalize Eskom. Do not let Eskom go to the ground. Don't let them get that idea into your heads, because that's what they're trying to sell through the media. I've never seen something so stupid. That's why I started speaking out. I said, I've never seen something so stupid. America does not even have privatized utilities everywhere. No country has. Okay, so don't, it's so absurd what people are proposing.
Yeah, then again, as you said earlier on, it feeds off to their bottom line because they're trying to, well, steal what's not theirs, essentially. Because privatization is it needs to be done strategically. You can't just privatize your.
Well, this is what my view of the smart grids. They're saying smart grid. Well, if it was smart, why isn't it working so well? So it's not smart. Why do you have to keep minding you smart? It's not smart. Okay.
But
so
also, why must the smart grid come at the cost of decommissioning your base load?
Yeah.
So why can't that work together with the smart grid?
Well, no, I've got the reason for you why they want the smart grid. Very simple. What is the lifespan of a battery? 10 years.
I think I have this. I think it's around 10 years, if I'm
Yeah,
mistaken.
it's 10 years. It's 10 years. It's 10 years. Okay. What is the lifespan of a wind farm? I designed them.
I
15 years. Okay.
I think it's 10 to 15 years, if I'm not mistaken.
It's 10 to 15. I designed them now for 15 years max. Okay.
Yeah,
That is.
10 to 15. I remember seeing
Okay.
the stat.
What is the lifespan of a solar panel, of a solar farm? It's maybe 20 years. And I think people say it's 40 or 40 years.
20 years, somewhere around there.
Okay, so what does that mean? It means private investors know it's short-term profit, so they can cash in again after 15 years. This is not complicated, guys. They want to sell you solutions that they know it's going to break. I'm a structural engineer, okay, by training. A civil nuclear engineer, we do structural engineering. I design wind farms. I'm telling it now. The failure on any infrastructure product is entropy. Okay, I wrote an article called "The Legend of Thomas Telford" on my Substack. Thomas Telford was the first ever civil engineer, because there used to be military and civil at the time. The thing that makes any infrastructure fail at the end is fatigue. What is fatigue? When a cycle stress up and down, up and down, up and down. That's why you want it in low entropy state. Okay, so they're selling you something of high entropy, something they know is going to break. This is not complicated. They're selling BS solutions because they know they're going to cash in again. No, South Africans are a bit more clever than that. We're not the Germans, okay? And we're not going to have the CSIR that's funded by German money telling us they are our scientific council. They are the propriety of the Bundestag at this stage. And so is the guy at UCT who admitted to me in an email, I'll show it to you guys, that he is linked to the anti-nuclear lobby. It's time we expose these people for what the hell they are. Our president is being funded by foreign infiltrators. If they're not, they're acting like them at least. And they're not speaking to the strategic national interest of South Africa. We're not going to take this cock. And that is what we need to stand up against.
And some of those fundings are in his farm, while the money is hidden in the sofas.
Yeah, there's always a bunch of crooks in Sandton that is cashing in on this thing. Okay, because no, I'm sorry, I don't buy this for a minute. Okay, that you cannot have a nationalized utility. When they say we do privatized utility, I'm like, okay, which country in the world has got a private utility? Show me one, just one.
Yeah,
I'm struggling to find one. The UK's got some of them, but it's the UK utilities are not private. Nonsense. They say that it's ran by EDF. The French bought the UK's electricity. That's how pathetic the English became. Okay. So who's the UK privatized their railways? Who's building the UK railways? The French. How do you feel when another country is building your infrastructure and monopolies? It means that you've bought the wrong ideology, which was deregulation. Okay. And why would somebody give you a wrong ideology? It's to destroy you geopolitically, to destroy your industries, to outsource your industries. This is these guys have been, it's strategic infiltration. So don't listen to these guys. It's nonsense.
So basically follow money. So especially with the just energy transition plan, follow the money where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's it. And listen to the people. I will give you my bank statement if anyone wants to see it. Okay. At this stage, I work for a salary. Okay, I'm a salary employed guy. I feel like I'm obliged as a civil engineer to raise my voice against what's going on because I'm totally astonished at the ignorance of civil engineering in South Africa at the moment. That people cannot see that it is not just a reactor, it's not just a pipeline, it is human habitat. And if you move something, you destroy human habitat. If you are going and read what happened in Russia, read a book by Professor Stephen Cohen, who died 2 years ago, saying war with Russia, ? And he referred to the origin of the problem was deregulation in Russia in the 1990s, destroyed their national utilities. It put their women into prostitution. That's why the Russians don't like the Americans at the moment. Okay. Don't let them do this to us. So no, they protect ESCOM and speak up against the media that is talking this cock about ESCOM at the moment. Because I was so shocked, as somebody who have worked with Electricité de France, it's one of the best utilities in the world. Things run. Nationalized stuff run. It's not the end of the planet.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So here in SA, we've got a lot to do when it comes to energy generation and securing our energy supply. And I, for one, I'll continue my good fights in terms of advocating for nuclear energy and how that could actually assist the country in terms of securing a supply. Albeit it won't come on now. Maybe that's one of the biggest problems with the people coming in to fund the program, because as you said earlier on, people are looking at short-term return of investments rather than an 80-year project whereby you start seeing or start enjoying the infrastructure, the benefits of that infrastructure 40 years down the line. I mean, take into consideration Coburg. It's not only benefiting the people of apartheid or the apartheid people, but then now it's benefiting positively to today's economy and possibly for the next.
And does that guy at the UCT, that Mr. Eberhard, does he know that his lights come from Coburg?
I think he knows, but he's gonna play ignorance to that. He's gonna be like the three blind mice. Is like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay attention to that, because I know much of Western Cape's electricity comes from the nuclear energy plants.
Cape Town is already a net zero city.
Yes, I heard. Yes, that I heard.
Because of nuclear power. So why are they promoting it?
It's partially because of the nuclear power plant that's there.
No, I'll tell you why they're promoting it. Because the Democratic Alliance own base is ignorant. The white South Africans are ignorant of this history. Okay?
Yeah.
They need to wake up a little bit.
They'll only push. They say they reach net zero based on renewable energy alone. They don't factor in that there's a consistent baseload supply that's being supplied by your nuclear energy plant. A bit right now it's under refurbishment and unit. I think it's between one of the units is down basically.
Okay. Well, there's something else that they don't know, which they're going to find out. Um, do they know that the people they're trying to kick off their land in Mpumalanga at the moment? I spoke to the petty prince here on this channel. They can come and talk to see that conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Do they know that the silicon wafers that go into their solar panels before they go to China, before they're made in China, comes from the same people you're trying to kick off your land if you want to strip them of coal? Are you guys aware
Oh,
of that? Do you think they're going to allow you to have solar panels if you let their communities collapse? I mean, you guys have got no clue what you're talking about. That is what I'm telling them. And I'm saying to
yeah,
all those workers, all those people in Malanga, you stand up. If Ramaphosa can't come and explain to you personally, don't vote for him, kick him out. Vote for Mantashe. At least he understands at this stage. Okay. And I'm saying to all the white South Africans, and especially the Afrikaners, okay, listen to what's going on in the country. Okay. At this stage, I think the EFF is probably the party that's got the best mindset. At least understand the problem. Just stop being a little bit less provocative against the Afrikaners. But all we need to do is we say, no, we reject this it's fucking unjust, man, a transition plan. And we go back to the same development plan the whites had for themselves under apartheid, which is the same plan China has, the same plan South Korea has, the same plan Japan had. It's heavy industry, and you throw your base load capacity, which they don't
I
want you to
will.
know, into new industries over and over until you improve the conditions of people and you lift them out of poverty. That's the low entropy theory of wealth. And I want any economic student to read a paper by Tony Wrigley titled Opening Pandora's Box about the role of energy in the Industrial Revolution. If you understand that thing, you understand 90% what we're talking of here. Forget about Milton Friedman. He's gone. He's dead. Okay. Hayek is dead. Okay. Listen to Sir Anthony Wrigley. And if you understand that man's works, you will realize you've read the works of the greatest economists of the century, and you realize that the apartheid, at least the Afrikaners, had instinct of what to do. Why? Because the first founding director of Eskom, Hendrik van der Bijl, he studied in America to study the New Deal, and he was an electrical engineer, and he worked for General Electric. He knew what was going on. They were applying energy everywhere. So, that's it. We need energy to make wealth, energy to make wealth, energy to make wealth. Energy in physics is defined as what? The capacity for work. Very simple.
Yeah.
Without energy, there's no capacity for work. There's no
Yeah.
jobs. Guys, that's economics. End of discussion.
Because literally energy does feed into the economy, because without energy a lot of things goes to a standstill, economy doesn't move.
Well, if you look at GDP per capita, what does it measure then in terms of energy? Let me test your knowledge on that.
I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure at the top of my head.
It tests the amount of low entropy energy in the system. It tests the
Oh, wow.
amount of energy that stays undisturbed.
Yeah,
GDP
yeah,
starts collapsing when infrastructure collapses because entropy goes up. So why do you want a wind turbine that keeps on spinning at high entropy? That's what I want to ask these guys. It's in contradiction to economic theory. So no,
yeah.
I want a nuclear power station that's got base load capacity, low entropy. We need low entropy fuels, and don't let them tell you otherwise. Okay, I've studied this stuff. Okay, they're talking cock. This whole thing.
Well, and 9 out of 10, these renewable energy and lobbyists, they just pay anyone who's going to blow horn and just promote their ideas, regardless of whether they know the facts around it. They don't care as long as they're able to push a certain narrative. They're okay. They're willing to spend on you, which is one of the biggest problems. So basically, people are selling themselves for money at the
Yeah.
cost of the at the bottom.
Well, go look at some of how those German communities were uprooted. Okay,
Yeah,
Germany. I see the Germans as you remember there was that aeroplane a few years ago that crashed into the mountain because the pilot committed suicide. It's in Germany. I think it was Lufthansa or one of these. I can't remember the airline now. That is how I see the Germans. Highly sophisticated economy that just panicked post Fukushima, destroyed their strategic national assets, and they crashed and committed economic suicide. And German factories are now leaving Germany and they're reinstating in the United States. The United States has defeated Germany for the third time in a century. Germans are now buying base load capacity from France. Okay. So
and you ask yourself, why would you close a nuclear energy plant if they've phased out nuclear energy?
yeah, after you've paid off the capex. I mean, it's so stupid. When it's running at its cheapest and most affordable rate, you start closing it down.
Because
What is
the best way to think about this is you selling your car only for you to borrow your car from your neighbor.
Yeah, no, it's
because you
if your parents, it's basically if your parents give you a car, and then you say I'm going to take out a loan and buy a new car that is 20 years older, and you throw away that car. That is basically what they've been doing. I mean, it's the dumbest thing. It's the dumbest thing I think of any industrial society. It's economic suicide. Second thing about nuclear power, and I just want to repeat this question: radiation is not dangerous. We have natural immunity to radiation. Okay.
also, I wanted to bring up that
Mm,
a banana, if you eat a banana, you get more radiation from eating a banana than staying close to a nuclear energy site.
yes. And South African flyers have got high radiation anyways. We've been putting it in our buildings for years. You guys are exposed to radiation. Get used to it,
The
okay?
MRIs in your clinic, there's
Yeah.
radiation there, there's radiation from the sun, there's literally radiation all around us. But then the narrative that's being pushed by your renewable energy people is that if you stay close to a nuclear energy site, what about the radiation? What's gonna Guys, those things, it's a highly sophisticated and well-regulated industry.
Mhm.
So from just eating a banana, you get more radiation than staying next to or close by a nuclear energy site for over a year.
Yeah, that's right. So, and waste. South Africa is one of the few countries in the world with an active waste depository. It's in the Karoo Desert, in the middle of nowhere. That's where we put
Yes.
the ghosts of radiation. So if the activists want to go protest in the desert, they never go protest in the desert, where the most waste is, because it's very hot in the sun. That's why we put it there. Okay,
Yeah.
so they could go protest in the Karoo Desert. Send them there with the waste. Okay,
And
the high-end waste is in Kuburg. It's welded shut, dry course storage. It stays there in
yeah,
200 years. Nothing happens to it. Okay, but here's another argument I want people to start thinking of. Okay, um, waste has a half-life. Now, in terms of economics, what does that mean? What if you have a capital investment, okay, and you have to pay 1 kilogram this year, and let's say next year it's half a kilogram, do I have to pay less or more money?
yes.
So it's a negative interest rate. What does it mean?
Yeah,
If you store waste, you make money off it. Why? Because the half-life approaches. It's a gold mine. It's a gold mine for investment.
please elaborate.
If why are people investing into the fuel cycle? Because it's not really radioactive waste. It's spent fuel that has not been
Yeah,
properly
you
used yet.
can recycle again,
Well, not just
given the
inside, you can put them in different reactors. Okay, we can
oh,
use the fuel in the different reactors to become the experts in the world in the refuel processing for all reactors. We can become the dominant power in the fuel cycle. We are one of the few countries. America cannot do it because they don't have a depository. We can invest into that. So don't tell you there's not more opportunity in nuclear. We haven't even exploited small molten salt reactors. I've had an interview with a guy in the Netherlands on that. I'm getting a guy from the thorium network to tell us about the thorium fuel cycle. South Africa's got some of the highest amounts of thorium in the world. It means we can be totally energy independent on our fuel. So no. South Africans are going to stand up for nuclear. And for coal, because we're not going to let those communities collapse. And let them not tell
and
you
coal.
otherwise.
Yeah, and coal we shouldn't stop using coal, FYI, like for the
Yeah.
next coming of years, because our contribution in comparison to the rest of the world is literally minute in terms of I was thinking, what's the word, pollution rather.
Yeah.
So within this net zero by 2050, and you must stop using coal, South Africa won't reach that. Like we are
No, look,
going.
I spoke to Dr. Richard Lindsay at MIT. Okay, let me the Dr. Richard Lindsay at MIT. I'm going to get him back on. I messaged him yesterday. He's 80 something. He was a guy in Jordan Peterson's podcast. I know him personally. His wife is French. Okay,
No,
he's been fighting this climate alarm since the 1989 when James Hansen gave his speech to Congress. What happened? At that period in time, NASA's budget was about to be cut. So they had to come up with a scare story to get funding. And that's why they said there was global warming. Okay. This is a complete nonsense. Go look at
no,
Michael Mann's hockey stick. And if you don't want to, I'll introduce you to Stephen McIntyre, who's exposed it. Is the Canadian thing. The
no.
IPCC has got some of its data based on upside down graphs. Okay, go to the website Climate Audit. This whole global warming thing is a complete nonsense. Okay, stop basing policy on things that doesn't make sense. Just
Yeah.
develop South Africa. It's only means to stop us from industrializing. End of discussion. And we're not
And it
going to
is,
have it for anyone.
they literally are cutting our legs short because to industrialize, you need a sufficient supply of energy, which is consistent. And again, I hate this narrative whereby they use renewable energy that works in smaller European countries, and then they try and they say, or they
They
tell
don't
us,
even work there. Show me one country where it works properly, where the rates haven't increased. Show me one. Denmark's got the most expensive electricity in the European Union. It's the
yeah,
base. The base.
again, which brings me to my former question: what is the cost to the end user when electricity is
The
produced?
cost to the end user is the cost in your pocket, not the cost on the guy's spreadsheet.
You end up paying more for electricity instead of less, but they tell you no, it's cleaner. That's why
No,
it's more
no,
government.
the argument is there that you have less saving. You've got more savings, so you're technically thermodynamically
Are you still there?
called Jevons paradox. Okay, Jevons was the economist that studied the Industrial Revolution. The more efficient you become at coal, the more you start using. Why? Because GDP per capita is low entropy fuel. You're looking for more energy to improve your standards of living. So what's happening? They might get more efficient at fuel usage in Germany and in the Denmark, but at the same time, that is not what is happening in practice, because they're taxing people to recover the cost for the integration. Okay, so no, don't listen. This is nonsense. Do what the Chinese are doing. They're ignoring this whole thing. The Indians are ignoring this whole thing. Focus on coal and focus on nuclear power, and we can have gas as an intermediary step until all our power plants are ready. Okay, the renewable guys can wait. We can use batteries to protect the grid. I'm in favor of that because then it's frequency stability, and then maybe later we can try this stuff to try and get low. What do you call these things? Wholesale costs down. Okay, from factories. There's an argument for sunshine. Okay, because they have a heavy industry demand in day. So there's a place for these guys, but their place will be on our terms. Okay, and that is what South Africans need to say. You're going to come in and you're going to respect the judgment of the engineers at Eskom, because when I speak to them, this is exactly what they're saying to me. They're not going to listen to some guy in Davos. You can take him to go away.
Well, if the guy from Davos is coming with money, they might be more inclined to listen to them rather than their own people here at home who
That is
knows.
why we need to set up our contractual laws so the guys of Davos cannot come in. Okay, we need to lock them out of our system. We need to think very carefully about who we are allowing as foreign investors. I know very good foreign investors in Africa, okay, that play safe, and they've got very good rules and they provide stuff in communities. I'm not judging all of them, but there are some of them are bloody criminals. Okay, and it's the criminals you want to keep out. You want to get the honest guys in, because some of them have got very good skills and very good investment, and they want to really believe in the development of Africa. But we need to make a distinction between which ones we want and which ones we don't want. And it's our judgment at the end of the day. It's our continent. It's not going to be the guys from they're not going to dictate policy to us. Sorry.
Yeah, again, I think it breeds onto this narrative of always relying on foreign investment coming into the country to be able to do something for ourselves. And the minute we do that, we need to abide by the terms and conditions, basically, which ultimately destroys us rather than builds us. So, again, you're right. We need to be able to dictate terms in order for us to develop properly and much more sustainably, actually.
No, that's right. Yeah, I think we can go on in this discussion for hours, but I really thank you for your input here. Okay, and I would really encourage people, please watch this channel, follow him on Twitter. He says some very intelligent things over there. And if anyone wants to join the conversation, I don't care whether you work in a mine, whether you're a union worker. I want your perspective. I want a perspective of ordinary people for developing the country. I don't care about the politicians, but I would say the Minister of Energy, that is Kwedi Mantashe, he gets stuff. He's under a lot of stress. Some of his advisors has phoned me, okay? Support him politically, because he's doing the right thing at the moment. And Ramaphosa and co must leave, because his brother is trying to strip mine, brother-in-law is trying to make more money out of the country. He's got enough money already. Okay, think for the development of the country. So that's my message to everyone, and thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No, thank you, Hugo, for the invitation. And yeah, this was a lovely conversation as you envisioned. But yeah, this was very informative. And I've actually got a couple of notes to go through, and the books that you recommended to read. I'll try my best to go through them as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening.